The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the ghost of you and me. Of you and me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
Tonight's show is going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about an article that has witnesses that are saying that they have seen a prehistoric reptile called a mosasaur. And this thing was badass. It was like, looked like a gigantic 50-foot long creature with the head of an alligator and like the body of a whale, with four flippers that look almost like legs. It was crazy looking. It looked like a gigantic badass plesiosaur, basically. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and check out this article. So Nigel, go ahead and read that article for me, brother.
Tonight's article comes from rmsobigfootblogspot.com. The headline is Living Dinosaur Found in Takla Lake, Canada. It was published February 14, 2019. A large aquatic monster up to 40 feet in length. Spotted in Takla Lake, British Columbia, Canada. Witness descriptions of the Takla Lake monster lead experts to believe these sightings may be the prehistoric mosasaur, a relative of reptiles that lived alongside dinosaurs, commonly thought to be extinct by many scientists. Would you like me to click the link for more information on the mosasaur?
Yes, go ahead and click on the link at the bottom of that as well.
The link took me to an article by thoughtco.com. The headline is Mosasaurs, the deadliest marine reptiles. The evolution and extinction of mosasaurs. It was written by Bob Strauss. It was published May 15, 2019. Although they weren't technically dinosaurs, the marine reptiles known as mosasaurs hold a unique place in paleontological history. It was the discovery of a specimen of Mosasaurus in 1764 in a Dutch quarry that galvanized scientists into the realization that species could become extinct, and that the earth used to be populated by some very strange creatures well before biblical times. Mosasaurus, lizard from the Meuse River, was soon named by the renowned naturalist Georges Cuvier, and the general name mosasaur attached to other members of this ancient family. In evolutionary terms, mosasaurs were distinct from three other famous groups of marine reptiles: ichthyosaurs, fish lizards; long-necked plesiosaurs; and short-necked plesiosaurs. These sleek reptilian predators may have been responsible for the extinction of the ichthyosaurs by the end of the Cretaceous period. Not necessarily by eating them, but by outcompeting them for food. And the quick, agile, hydrodynamic builds gave plesiosaurs and plesiosaurs a run for their money. Essentially, mosasaurs ruled the seas for about 20 million years, until the KT extinction expunged most giant reptiles and all the marine varieties from the face of the Earth 65 million years ago. Mosasaur evolution. While it would be tempting to speculate that mosasaurs evolved from ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, this doesn't appear to be the case. The recent discovery of the small amphibious Thalasaurus which was capable of swimming as well as walking on land. Hints that mosasaurs evolved from early Cretaceous reptiles very similar in appearance to modern monitor lizards. Another transitional candidate is the European Aegialosaurus. Less certain is the proposed evolutionary relationship between ancient mosasaurs and modern snakes. The two reptile families share sleek body plans, scaly skin, and the ability to open their mouths extra wide. But the rest is a matter of debate. In geological terms, one of the odd things about mosasaurs is that their fossils tend to turn up far inland, especially in the western United States and the interior of Western Europe, along with other continents. In the case of the US, this is because, back in Cretaceous times, much of North America was covered by the Great Interior Sea, or the Sundance Sea, as it's also called, a broad but shallow body of water that swamped large portions of modern-day Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado. Kansas alone has yielded 3 major mosasaur genera: Tylosaurus, Platecarpus, and Cladaistes. Mosasaur lifestyles. As you might expect with such a long-lasting family of marine reptiles, not all mosasaurs were in the same weight class or pursued the same diet. The largest individuals of Mosasaurus attained lengths of 50 feet and weights of 15 or so tons. But other genera were considerably sleeker. Tylosaurus, for example, packed only about 7 tons into its 35-foot length, and Platecarpus, judging by its fossil remains, the most common mosasaur of North America, was only about 14 feet long and a few hundred pounds. Why these variations? Reasoning by analogy with modern marine predators, like the great white shark. It's likely that bigger mosasaur genera like Mosasaurus and Hinosaurus feasted on their fellow mosasaurs and marine reptiles, while smaller species like Cladaistes made do with relatively harmless prehistoric fish. And to judge by the round pebbly shapes of their teeth, it seems that other mosasaurs like Globidens and Prognathodon specialized in gobbling down shelled prey, ranging from small mollusks and ammonites to larger and tougher sea turtles. At the time they went extinct, mosasaurs were facing increased competition from prehistoric sharks. A good example being Cretosirena, aka the Jinshu shark. Not only were some of these sharks sleeker, faster and more vicious than the likes of Tylosaurus and Globidens, but they may have been smarter as well. The mass extinction of marine reptiles in the wake of the KT extinction allowed sharks, the new apex predators, to evolve to bigger and bigger sizes in the course of the Cenozoic era. The culmination of this trend was the truly enormous, up to 50 feet long and 50 tons, Megalodon. And that is the end of the article.
All right, thank you, Nigel. Appreciate you. And as you guys can see, if this thing is real, we're talking about an insane kind of creature. We're talking about these things would get to 40 to 50 feet long, like 15 tons on the upper side of the bigger ones. And they were just absolute killing machines. These things were terrible. So if it is true that people have spotted these things, that is pretty impressive. But I don't know if it's true or not. So let me put that out there right now, point blank in the beginning of this, that we have no idea whether these sightings actually occurred or what. But we do have people that are saying that they have seen this thing. But the more interesting question to me is they talked about a lot of different things in the article and about in the second article about the mosasaur. They talked about plesiosaurs in there, which is what a lot of people think that Nessie is a plesiosaur. They talked about some of the things that it would eat, like sea turtles. Now, sea turtles are still around today. If Nessie is a plesiosaur, then that means plesiosaurs are still around today. At the very least, Nessie is some sort of prehistoric animal, I would imagine. So we have something that's still around today. Alligators were around back then, and they're still around today. You had sharks that took over after these aquatic reptiles died off, according to science, and they were able to grow larger and eventually turn into the megalodon shark. And a lot of those sharks are still around today. So that kind of brings me to my general idea on this, and my thought is, if the mosasaur is still around, even in a very small number, if those witnesses were correct in what they saw, and I don't think there can be much misidentification here, because this thing, look it up online, like Google mosasaur and check out the pictures, man. This thing is bad news. Nothing else looks like it. It is crazy looking. Big, long mouth with all these crazy teeth. This thing is vicious looking. So I don't think that somebody saw a normal whale and said, oh, look, I think that's a mosasaur. Either they saw what they saw or they're lying. One of the two. But if this thing is still around, if it still exists, we also have witness reports of people that have claimed to have seen the megalodon shark. So the megalodon is actually more recent than the mosasaur. As far as the mosasaur was in existence before the megalodon. So if the mosasaur is still around, why couldn't the megalodon still be around? The mosasaur, the larger ones were, as I said, around 50 feet, 15 tons. So that would definitely be a little bit larger than a full-grown megalodon. So why couldn't a megalodon still be out there? If there's enough food to feed the mosasaur, and it can remain relatively hidden for this long, why couldn't a megalodon survive and remain relatively hidden other than a few witnesses? Makes sense to me. I mentioned Nessie being potentially a plesiosaur, some people say. Now, I have my doubts on whether Nessie actually is a plesiosaur or not. The problem is that plesiosaurs breathe air. So they had to come up for air quite a bit. So I think there would be a lot more sightings of Nessie if Nessie was a plesiosaur, because she would have to come up for air way more often. But who knows? It's a big whole system of locks that leads out to the ocean. We did an episode before where we talked about, I think it was on Paranormal News, but it might have been Staring, where we talked about all of those locks in Scotland being kind of a system that runs together, how they're all connected, and how Nessie could literally go from one lock to another through underground tunnels that were flooded, and some of the locks are just flat out connected above land as well. And anyway, the system runs all the way out to the ocean, because they had sightings of Nessie in the ocean, right in the bay there. And there were photographs and everything that I showed. So if Nessie is still around, and that's a plesiosaur potentially, or some other prehistoric aquatic animal, then maybe Bigfoot? A lot of people, including myself, think that Bigfoot is a Gigantopithecus, which is an early human ancestor. There's no reason to believe that that couldn't be the case too. And as we go down the line here, more and more things. Look at the coelacanth that they caught in Madagascar. That was supposedly extinct for millions of years. And they know now that it's still out there and alive. So it's possible. Do I think that there is a breeding population of mosasaurs out there somewhere that people are finding and spotting? I don't know for sure. That's the honest answer. I don't know. I can tell you that these things are very, very, very large. Supposedly this thing was spotted in a place called Takla Lake in British Columbia, Canada. So this is a lake. I don't know if this lake connects out to the ocean in any way, but if not, you've got a 40-foot to 50-foot creature that is living inside the lake. Now it's going to have food. It's going to have a breeding population of these things in order for it to still be there, which means there has to be enough of them to continually produce young to keep the species going. And it has to be enough to where you can avoid genetic malformities that are so bad that it ends up killing the offspring. So that means you have to have a lot of these things, hundreds, maybe even thousands of these things, living in the lake in order for it to still be there after all this time. So how big is the lake? Is it something that could support this kind of a population of animals that are that damn large? See, I went here on Google. It says Takla Lake is the 5th largest natural lake in British Columbia. It is a deep fjord-like lake with Swanel Ranges to the east, the driftwood. Let me see a picture here on Google Maps. Because if this thing is connected to the ocean in some way, then it's a whole nother story. See, it's connected to, I'm reading here on Wikipedia, it's connected to several different rivers. It looks like, from the photographs here of the map, it looks like there are river systems that connect to this lake that lead out to the ocean. I mean, I would have to literally sit down and with a big map and trace it all the way to tell you, but it looks like there is an outlet of the lake that leads all the way through a series of different rivers and tributaries and stuff. It looks like it leads all the way to the ocean. So if that is the case, then that's a game changer, because then you could potentially have a breeding population that is traveling, that's living mainly out in the ocean, but it's traveling to this lake maybe to breed or to spawn or as a food source once in a while or something. Because you'll have bull sharks that can go up river systems and show up in lakes and rivers hundreds of miles inland. It happens all the time. So if that's the case, then the potential is there that there could be a breeding population of these things if they're still around. So if the witness reports are correct and that is what these people saw, the lake that they saw it in is large enough to contain one of these or many of these, and it does appear that they could travel up a river system to reach the ocean. So with that being the case, I would say it's absolutely possible that there is a breeding population of these things left, because they could easily live out in the ocean, something that size, because you have whales that are much larger than that you never see. So it could easily be that they are still around out there in the ocean. Now, are they? Who knows? I'm not going to sit there and tell you that yes, they're absolutely still in existence, because I haven't seen one myself. I haven't seen any video, I haven't seen any photographs, I haven't seen anything that would tell me that these things are still out there other than witness reports of people that claim to have seen them. But I do not know whether those witness reports are correct. I don't know the history of these people. I don't know how many sightings there's been overall. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. As you saw with the article, it was very, very short. It was literally one page after the headline. And then it had a link that took you to another article that gave you a hell of a lot of good information on the mosasaur itself. But as far as the sightings, we got almost nothing. So I would have to have a lot more information to make a real determination of whether this thing actually exists, or, I mean, I know it did exist back in the day, but I'm saying if it still exists, if it's still there and the witness reports are true, I don't have enough information to make that call. But the interesting thing to me is you have a lot of animals from that time period and before that are still around today. I mentioned a few of them. You have the alligators, you have sea turtles, you have sharks. There are a lot of different things that still are around today that were around then. So if that's the case, and we know it to be the case with the known animals, Is it possible that a mosasaur or a plesiosaur in the case of Nessie possibly, or Gigantopithecus in the case of Bigfoot, or Mokele Mimbe, that is a small dinosaur that resembles a miniature brontosaurus, essentially, that is down in the Congo area. That is a possibility to have still survived in a hidden area like that. It's possible. Is it 100% true? Who knows? Until we actually see these things for sure and we know, then it's hard to make that determination 100%. But I can tell you, there have been several times when they've said things have been extinct and they're not extinct. A prime example of something that's really, really old was the coelacanth that I talked about. But also we've got several animals that have been labeled as extinct, and then you have sightings of them, like the Tasmanian tiger. Things like that where they say this thing is extinct, it's dead, it isn't around anymore, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, here's one on camera. You know, those things happen a lot. So if that is the case, to where these things are still around, and if Nessie is a plesiosaur or some other prehistoric animal that has survived, if Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus and has survived, if Mokele Mimbe is still around and is some sort of brontosaurus type dinosaur, it's not really a brontosaurus because they were gigantic, but it's something similar to it that was smaller. If all these things still exist, that's a pretty amazing thing, isn't it? I mean, keep in mind, we're not talking about some supernatural, crazy idea that you have to believe in monsters or you have to believe in a man changing into a werewolf or something like that. We're talking about real, living creatures that existed on Earth at one point in time. So the only thing we're wondering here is not do they exist, because yes, they absolutely did exist. There's fossil records, there's proof beyond a shadow of a doubt all of these things existed in the past. The question is, do they still exist? Have some of them survived over the years and they're still around? Now, you heard me say earlier there had to be a breeding population. That's super important for every single one of these creatures. Because we're not dealing with a supernatural creature, we're dealing with a flesh and blood animal here. Because it's not supernatural or magical in any way, that means that there has to be what they call a breeding population of each of these things. That is enough males and females that will breed together to produce offspring. And you have to have enough of them so that there's enough genetic diversity so that you don't end up with babies that are massively deformed because of inbreeding. When that happens, a lot of times the babies don't survive, especially in nature, because animals don't take care of their young the same way we do. So if the baby is born very deformed, it's just kind of screwed. It don't have a chance. It's going to die. So if that continues to happen because you have massive inbreeding, because you don't have enough genetic diversity, then all of a sudden the number of births that survive to the breeding age themselves drops way, way down. And the ones that are able to breed are all deformed. So they have even worse children than they were. More deformed, more messed up. And that continues for several generations with the very strongest of them living, most of them dying. The population continues to shrink until it reaches a point where it just simply cannot continue because there's not enough. So that is what a breeding population is for anybody who's listening who doesn't understand that or doesn't know. So anytime you're talking about one of these cryptid creatures, whether it's Bigfoot or Nessie or Chupacabra or Mokele Mimbe or the Mosasaur here or the Megalodon or any of them, right? There has to be enough of them left to have survived to this point. So if you're talking Nessie, it can't just be one in Loch Ness that's still there. Because there's no way in hell, if Nessie is a plesiosaur or something like it, that thing has lived since the time of dinosaurs. There's absolutely no chance that that's true. It has been born and has lived its life and died many, many times since. So what you have is a plesiosaur, or a fill in the blank with whatever the hell dinosaur you're talking about, that was born 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, 20 years ago, who knows? I don't know what the lifespan of all these things are. But it's going to have a set lifespan that's going to be measured, if it's lucky, in the hundreds of years. But it's definitely not going to be thousands of years old. It's not going to be hundreds of thousands of years old. So you don't just have one. You have to have a lot. So with that, you have to think, is the habitat enough to support a group like that? And it has to be a group of thousands. It can't be just a couple. Because you're going to run into the problem of genetic diversity, inbreeding, deformity, death. Can't happen. Has to have at least a couple hundred, better thousands, even better tens of thousands, to provide that genetic diversity that can keep the species going over the millennia. So, you have to think, is the habitat good enough that these things can survive? And that's always been the issue with Nessie. Because even though Loch Ness is big, before we realized that Loch Ness was connected in a whole series of locks that led out to the ocean, and that Nessie could literally swim from Loch Ness all the way to the ocean if she chose to. Before we realized that, the problem always was, is how the hell is there a breeding population of these things that are that big in the loch and nobody's really noticed yet? You've had sightings here or there, but if there's that many of them things in there, you should be seeing that thing every other damn day. We should have good video of it. People should be selling rides on the damn thing, for goodness sake. That's what should be going on if there's that many in that small area. Granted, loch is big. I'm not saying it's not. But compared to the number of these things that are potentially there, the space is not that great. That was always the problem. Now, knowing that the majority of them could live in the ocean, which is vast, and travel to the loch for breeding purposes or whatever, and then travel back, all of a sudden, game changer. Not only does that make it absolutely possible for it to be true, but also it makes sense. It follows the natural behavior of animals. We know of a lot of different animals that travel. Salmon are a great example. They travel great distances to get back to a certain pond or a certain lake or a certain area where they were born. And that's their breeding grounds, and they breed there. Sea turtles, which are from the same time period as these things, the mosasaurs, they will travel all the way across the damn ocean to get to one particular beach so they can crawl up there, lay their eggs, bury them, and go back out in the ocean again. But you have a lot of examples of that in nature, to where animals will travel great distances and go above and beyond what you would think that an animal would normally do to get to one particular place so that they can breed. And then sometimes, like in the case of salmon, they die. Other cases, like the sea turtle, they just swim back out to the ocean and wait to do it again. So it's possible, and it makes sense when you look at the behavior of other animals traveling to an area. It makes sense that Nessie could live in the ocean, travel to the loch in order to breed or lay eggs or whatever the hell Nessie does, and then swim back out to the ocean. It makes sense. When you look at Bigfoot, you're talking Gigantopithecus. A lot of the behaviors match up with behaviors that you would expect something like the Gigantopithecus to have. Primitive cave type person. They would communicate through a series of different sounds. Before language got really developed well, you would have howls, you would have grunts, you would have different songs almost. They use wood knocks in order to communicate with each other. Certain numbers of hits on a tree mean certain things to these things. It's a language of their own they've kind of developed that's primitive. that matches up and makes sense with what we know about primitive man and how they work. I'm not talking about caveman. I'm talking about before caveman. We're talking Homo erectus. We're talking Homo floresiensis. We're talking Gigantopithecus. We're talking Homo sapiens, but the early versions. All of these things had primitive language. They had primitive artwork. They had primitive communication skills that were not as developed as we were. So the behavior of Bigfoot makes sense as well. So I think what we're looking at in a lot of these cases are simply animals that are still here from prehistoric time. Okay, we're talking a long, long time ago these things existed in great numbers, and now you have a small number that are still around because they're good at hiding. And they live in places we don't go very often. So that's why they were able to make it. That's my opinion on it. As far as whether the mosasaurs are still around or not, as I said, who knows? I would like to think they are, because that's interesting and exciting, but I'll tell you right now, those damn things are scary looking. Go look that up. You will not be disappointed that you did. So with that being said, I'm going to throw it back over to Old Boy, and I'm going to get his opinion on all this. So Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. And the mosasaur is a pretty interesting creature. It's almost 40 to 50 feet long. They see it in this lake. Do I think it's real? Well, here's my opinion on everything, guys. I don't know if the story is true, but I believe it probably might exist, but it is very big. But a lot of these lakes, like oceans, all have like channels like of streams going through it, just like Loch Ness does. It goes through to the lakes to the ocean, and they don't even know how deep it actually goes in Loch Ness. There's a cavern that it goes further than they can go. So, do I think there's a possibility this thing exists? I don't know if in this lake. Maybe if it does, it just breeds there, or maybe it takes a break from the ocean. It has like a channel that comes through the ground. I don't know if what you guys think about that. So when you guys, get this video, tell us what you think. Give us a comment. Tell us what your opinions on this thing. The Mosasaurus is a crazy looking creature. Huge. Something you probably don't want to be swimming around because it's going to eat you. I think you might have seen it on Jurassic Park. I don't know. I think that might have been something else, but it's kind of nasty like that, guys. And if you've seen the pictures of it, it's something you don't want to fall victim to. If you fell in the ocean or the lake or whatever the hell this thing's at, you're pretty much toast. Probably toast if you're in a little boat too, a little pontoon boat. You'd probably eat you. Razor sharp teeth. Nasty looking, like he was saying. Now, do I believe what these people are saying? I don't know. There's a lot of people say that it exists in this lake. And it was on Jurassic World. So you guys seen how big that thing gets? They're no joke. They could eat a great white with no problem because they're bigger, 2 times bigger than them. So they can eat this thing like nothing. So that should tell you how huge they are. I don't know. A Megalodon, it's bigger. Supposedly they get bigger than that. 60 to 75 now. They're saying they're even bigger than what they originally thought. That would be a nice battle. I don't know what you guys would tell me who you think would win in a battle like that. Because James pretty much summed everything up. And he gets into his scientific stuff. And there's really nothing for me to go on. Because he just really studies this stuff. And when it comes to dinosaurs and crypto, he knows his stuff, guys. And it's kind of hard to follow after him sometimes. But who do you think would win a fight between those two? I don't know. I think the Megalodon would come out, but it would be a pretty interesting fight. They're pretty big, both of them. But now, in this lake, I don't know, because like I said, dude, people would be missing. Because I know people swim in lakes. You would have people disappearing and things happening and fish just getting tore apart. Something would fall in there. Eventually somebody would get eaten in. Or you never know, some dog or something goes in the water. It would have been gone. It would have been you would have never seen it again. Or I mean, people would have never seen it again. So you would have heard a lot of people making claims. So I don't know if it's that. Maybe it might be something else like Champ up in Canada, you know, and the that it looks like the Loch Ness Monster, but it's a little bit smaller, and a plesiosaur. There's also sea serpents people say they see. They're 40 to 50 feet long. There's a story about a guy got, when he was a kid, his friend got taken away by this 40, 50-foot serpent, sea serpent. That's what he said it looked like. It had a large neck like a snake, and it was black and had fins, and it was huge. And it took his friend, and they never seen him again. And he claims this to this day, so it might be one of those. I've never heard of anything being 40 to 50 other than whales and sharks. And that's whale sharks, not regular sharks. Blue whales and gray whales get that big, and the giant squid, but something that long, 40 to 50 feet, I don't know, man. That it could be that. It's just hard to believe, because you would see things getting killed all the time, and people would be getting attacked and killed and eaten. And that's why it's kind of hard for me to believe that, because these things are massive, guys. If you've seen pictures of them, you've seen Jurassic World, go check it out. You'll see how big these things get. That's why it's kind of hard to believe if that is what they're saying. They're nasty, ugly, giant monsters that we were talking about this earlier, me and James, that they're just nasty, and you don't want to mess with these things. So if this thing is real, please don't go trying to look for it, because I know somebody will, because there's always got to be somebody has to prove they exist. Just like he was talking about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. These things don't really attack people unless they're provoked. This thing doesn't really care. It'll eat you if it's real. It is real at one time. They're supposed to be extinct. But there's just something you can't just go catch in your pontoon boat to go fishing in your tackle box. This thing will eat you. And everything... And if you have people with you in your little pontoon boat, it'll probably be gone too. Don't try to go and find it unless you're with experts, and a giant boat is about as big as the fish, because if this thing exists, it's got no heart. They're pretty much like, they're black. They're black. Well, what I'm saying, black-eyed, they have no soul. Is the way I'm saying. They're black. They have black hearts. They basically don't have hearts. They just don't kill. They're just killing machines. They eat whatever they see. It's like an alligator, guys. You know, you've seen the big giant alligators. They don't have any soul. They're if you look in their eyes, they're dark as night. The mosasaur is something you probably don't want to try to go fishing for. It's not like you're going to catch it with, like I was saying, with a tackle box and a regular fishing pole. I don't suggest people try to go in the lake itself to find it. If you're going to try it, take pictures on the shore or stuff like that. See if it actually exists. If people are even listening to this in that part of the country. But I have to agree with James. If it does exist, it probably goes through channels in the lakes, and it probably goes through back. It could probably breathe in ocean and regular water. There is fish that can do it, like the snakehead. I don't know if you guys ever seen it. Looks like a snake. They're nasty looking too, and they can go in lake and regular water, and they can also walk on land to move to other lakes. It also can go in the ocean. They can breathe both and air. I believe this thing, if it existed, it has over the years has evolved and probably can breathe in both freshwater and saltwater, and that's probably what. That's what the snakehead can do. There are another. If you ever heard what the snakehead, people put these things in ponds and it eats everything, and they get huge. And this thing is a predator, so like I was saying, any fish in there would eat majority of the fish. It's so big, you would have like a huge amount of, I don't know what's in this lake, trout, probably catfish, and catfish get really big. And you would see these things missing at an alarming rate, especially there's a school of these things. A lot of things would come up missing. People would come up missing. If there's more than one or two of these things, you would know. That's why I don't believe it's in this lake. And if it does, it only comes for maybe at a certain time of the year because the water is warmer, maybe, or colder. I don't know. I don't know if it takes cold water or warm water. It probably is warmer. So that's probably what it does. It goes to warmer water. And maybe it's just a shortcut to get where it's going. And that could be a possibility. So, other than that, James, that's all I got to say. So, there you go, buddy.
Well, you have to remember that this thing was a marine reptile. It's what the article said. So, if it's anything else like other reptiles, it's going to have to regulate its temperature via thermal regulation, like from the sun or the shade, depending on whether it needs to be hotter or colder. So most likely, it's going to be wanting to head towards warm water. If it's like any other reptile, because they're cold-blooded, they like to have the warmth. But one interesting thing about this is the fact that we don't really know for sure. And that is what makes science so damn fun and so amazing. There's too many people nowadays who always think that the science is settled on this thing or that thing or whatever. And I would say to that respectfully, that's nonsense. The science is almost never settled on anything. That's the whole point of science, is if you cannot question it, it's not science. If you cannot experiment and test the hypothesis, then it is not science. Science is built upon people that have a crazy idea. That's what it is thought of at the time when it first comes out, as a crazy idea. And this is multiple different things. I mean, it goes all the way from the first people who said the world was round. They were thought of as crazy. You would go off the edge. You had people that were trying to fight listeria and everything. The first people to sterilize surgical instruments. There was several scientists who were trying to say, hey guys, I think we need to start sterilizing these things, because what's happening is we're causing infections in the patients and they're getting sick and dying. And I think it's because all of our stuff is filthy. Because see, back then it was viewed as a badge of honor to have the bloodiest apron possible, and that your tools were just filthy bloody, because that showed that you had done many operations. So you had a great deal of experience. So it was considered to be good, but as we now know, that's very bad. Most of the people that died, like in the Civil War, died from infection after the amputations. They didn't really die so much in the battle. You had some, but there was a lot of them that died from infection and sickness afterwards. Science is the act of questioning. You say, why? Why does this happen? Okay, well, here's my theory, my hypothesis. So then you follow the scientific method. You form the hypothesis, then you devise a test to test the hypothesis and see if your hypothesis is correct. In some cases it is, in some cases it's not. If it is, then it becomes a theory. And other scientists will try to test it and try to prove or disprove it. If it doesn't, then you go back to the drawing board and you try to figure out again what your hypothesis is. You go through the same process again. Science is built upon questioning. Science is built upon thinking outside of the box and thinking of the wildest and wackiest things you can imagine and then proving them true. My favorite field in science, which is astrophysics, is absolutely chock full of that. You're talking string theory, you're talking multiverse theory, you're talking multiple dimensions existing in the same place at the same time. Wild stuff. But then you have to do the work of trying to prove it. So here we have witness reports of this creature who has supposedly been extinct for a long time. But we have seen in other cases to where animals who were supposedly extinct for long periods of time ended up not being extinct. There is still a population of them out there that exist. And I think, once again, that is what we are dealing with when we look at all of the different cryptid creatures. I think we're dealing with living examples of the past. These are things that at one point in time on Earth absolutely existed. 100% they were here, and some of them have survived. I think there's a lot of things like that. And I think some things survive in different ways, such as Neanderthal. I don't think that Neanderthal got wiped out in some big war with humanity, which is what some scientists believe. I think what happened to Neanderthal is that they were kind of a little bit too much like us. They were different. They were stockier. They were built differently. They looked a little bit different. And we kind of had more going on in the brain area. Although they weren't stupid. People think they're stupid, but they weren't. They were capable of strategic planning and all that stuff too. So it's not like they were dumb. But I think what happened is we looked too much alike. Enough alike, at least, to where there was romantic interest there. So people did what people always do and made babies with the Neanderthal. And over the generations, what happened is the Neanderthal simply got bred out of existence. That our genetics were dominant, and that's what happened to the Neanderthal. That's my opinion on it. Now, that hypothesis, when you try to prove, is kind of backed up because you do have people nowadays that still have some of that genetic material from Neanderthals. Their genes are still with us today. In humanity's genome, you have segments from the Neanderthal genome. Fascinating stuff. So I think that is what happened there. I think that we got together and hooked up and ended up getting rid of Neanderthal because after so many generations, there just weren't any purebred Neanderthals anymore. Here's a weird little idea. What if we are not the original Homo sapiens either? What if you had Homo sapiens and you had Neanderthal and they got together and they started breeding and we are the result of that crossbreeding? So we do not resemble Neanderthals completely, and we do not resemble the original Homo sapiens completely either. That we're something different that was created from the pairing of those two. I literally just thought of that, so I don't know how true that is. I don't know if that can be easily disproven by evidence. I'll have to look into it, but it's an interesting idea. Because if Neanderthal got breeded out through mating with Homo sapien and produce offspring that still have some DNA and genome from Neanderthal mixed with Homo sapien, then wouldn't it stand to reason that Homo sapien wouldn't be the original Homo sapien either? That they would have changed as well throughout the generations? So maybe Neanderthal and Homo sapien actually went away. The original Homo sapien at least. And what we call Homo sapien today, which is us, is different than the original was. We are a crossbreeding of the two. It's an interesting thing to explore, and I think it probably has some merit to it. But we'll see. But anyway, back to what we're talking about, the mosasaur. I don't know how the hell I got off way over on Neanderthal and the breeding habits of Homo sapiens and Neanderthal. That was weird. Somehow I managed to get there. But I think that it's possible that the mosasaur still exists. I think it's probably not probable. We do have the witness reports, but I don't know how reliable those are. And it all goes back once again to the breeding population. And Old Boy made a very, very good point. That if you have a large number or a breeding population of 40 to 50 foot long killers, that weigh 15 tons and have a mouthful of razor sharp teeth who just love to eat you because they're predators, there would be a hell of a lot more carnage going on than there is. You would definitely know about it. That would be a no swim zone for sure. You would have reports of people that have been eaten by this thing. I think it is possible, but not probable. That's where I'm going to come down on it. And I'm going to throw over to Old Boy for his final sum up and shout outs, and then we will wrap up. Old Boy, go ahead, brother.
I hope you guys enjoyed the show on Parax Radio on Sunday nights at 9 Pacific time, 12 Eastern, technically Monday morning. You guys want to listen to any of the other shows, go on James Hershey's YouTube page and subscribe. If you want to get any merchandise, I'll tell you where to go to get shirts, COVID masks, all kinds of cool stuff. So check it out, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. So I hope you have a good night. Misfits, Sugar Ladies, Monster Lovers, Demon Hunters, I love you, and blessed be.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching the show. Thank you for listening on the radio. Thank you for watching the video on YouTube. Thanks for hanging out with us again. We really enjoy doing the show, and I enjoy episodes like this where you can kind of go off on a tangent and just try to figure out whether something's real or not, or whether it still exists or not. It's really fun for me, that academic exercise, the mental gymnastics that it takes in order to do that. With that being said, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. That's where all the videos are. Down in the description box of the YouTube video is the link to the store and all the other links. So go to YouTube and check out the video there, and you can see all of the links and the merch and all that jazz. So as always, completely up to you to make up your own mind on this. Let us know down in the comments what you think. And as I said, we will catch you on the next one. So until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.